Hollywood will feed you the same dusty classics until your eyes glaze over. The Searchers, Shane, High Noon. Sure, they're icons, but let's get real. There's a whole corral of westerns that never get their due, buried under decades of tumbleweeds and hype. Why do these films keep slipping through the cracks? And what are you missing by sticking to the same 10 titles? Saddle up, because we're about to blaze a trail through 15 forgotten westerns you absolutely need to watch. If you think you know the genre, think again. The Tall T, 1957. How do you make a western that's pure as whiskey and twice as strong? You cast Randolph Scott, let Elmore Leonard write the rules, and strip it all down to survival. That's The Tall T, a film so lean it barely gives you time to breathe. Forget cowboy cliches. This is a western where the biggest danger isn't a posse, but a single sweaty moment in a standoff. Scott plays Pat Brennan, a quiet drifter who loses his horse on a bet and ends up sharing a stagecoach with a honeymooning couple. It sounds harmless, right? Until they're hijacked by bandits, led by Richard Boone, who brings a kind of casual menace that makes you glance over your shoulder every time he's on screen. The bandits aren't cartoon villains either. They're desperate, twitchy, and so painfully real it hurts. Director Bud Bodeker milks the tension, letting silences speak louder than gunshots. The desert feels endless. Every move counts. Even the hero is no invincible gunslinger. He's a man just trying to outwit the odds, with nothing but grit and a promise of candy sticks to a kid he hardly knows. The Tall T doesn't need grand speeches or sweeping vistas to get under your skin. It just loads the chamber and waits. Pure, tough, unforgettable. Hour of the Gun, 1967. If you're expecting another slow-motion retelling of the OK Corral, you're in for a jolt. Hour of the Gun doesn't care about replaying history's most famous shootout. It blasts right through it in the first 10 minutes and spends the rest of the movie picking up the bloody pieces. James Garner and Jason Robards, as Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday, team up in a western where justice is messier than ever. Most westerns tie up their stories with a bow and a sunset. Not here. Hour of the Gun is all about what happens after the legend, the courtroom drama, the vendettas, the moral gray zones nobody wants to talk about. Robert Ryan chews the scenery as Ike Clanton, making you wonder if the real villains ever actually lose. Director John Sturges trades swagger for simmering anger. There's no John Wayne heroics here, just men weighed down by grudges and regrets, forced to face what comes next when the shooting's done. The lack of female characters didn't win any points with modern critics, and the box office didn't know what to do with it. But if you want a western with brains, bruises, and a haunting sense of what real justice costs, Hour of the Gun is the bulletproof vest you didn't know you needed. Chino, 1973. Charles Bronson was never your standard Western hero. In Chino, he doesn't ride in with guns blazing or one-liners flying. He's a horse trainer on the outskirts of society, straddling the lines of heritage, loneliness, and forbidden longing. The gunfights, minimal. The tension, quietly explosive. Bronson's Chino Valdez is a man of mixed background, mistrusted by the townsfolk, and even by the boy he takes under his wing. The kid, played with surprising honesty by Vincent Van Patten, isn't just a sidekick. He's the lens through which the whole story changes shape. And then there's Jill Ireland, Bronson's real-life partner, whose character brings all the unspoken longing and quiet heartbreak that you never see coming in a so-called simple Western. What's wild is how the movie tiptoes around themes most Westerns wouldn't dare: identity, exclusion, and yearning for acceptance. It tackles prejudice without ever getting heavy-handed. There's even a romance so charged you can practically feel the dust in your teeth. Chino is a western that trades gunfire for soul, with Bronson smoldering at the center like a campfire at midnight. Miss this one, and you're skipping the kind of character work that made the genre great. Track of the Cat, 1954. Forget the sun-baked deserts and open plains. Track of the Cat drops you in the middle of a snowstorm so icy you'll shiver through your popcorn. Robert Mitchum plays Kurt Bridges, a rancher as unpredictable as the mountain cat he's hunting. The movie isn't about bullets or bank robberies. It's about what happens when family secrets start clawing their way out in a blizzard. Director William Wellman ditches the usual Western palette for stark black and white cinematography, interrupted by flashes of color so sharp they jolt you awake. It's claustrophobic, moody, and practically sweats with dread. The family trapped in the ranch house turns on itself, fighting old grudges and unraveling right before your eyes. Mitchum's Kurt is no hero. He's haunted, angry, and dangerous. The track is more psychological than physical, with every character grappling their own fears. Even Mitchum himself said the shoot was brutal, and you feel every second of that discomfort. Track of the Cat is what happens when the Wild West collides with gothic horror. It's the Western as fever dream, and if you're tired of formula, this is the deep cut you need. The Hired Hand, 1971. Sometimes, the West isn't about who draws first. It's about who dares to come home. The Hired Hand flips the gunslinger myth on its head with Peter Fonda in front of and behind the camera. He plays Harry Collings, a drifter who rides back to the wife he abandoned years before, only to find that the home he left doesn't need him anymore. Instead of wild chases and showdowns, The Hired Hand gives you slow, burning regret, longing, and the ache of missed chances. Verna Bloom as the wife isn't just a supporting role. She's the moral core, and her hard-earned independence makes every scene crackle. The real genius here is the mood. The film feels like a daydream, with gorgeous visuals, haunting music, and a sense of time slipping away. Universal gave Fonda free rein after the chaos of Easy Rider, and he turned in a Western that's as much about reconciliation as revenge. It's quiet, but never dull. The final act builds with the inevitability of a thunderstorm, slow, tense, and devastating. If you think all Westerns are just six shooters and swagger, The Hired Hand is here to prove you wrong. Sometimes the hardest thing in the West isn't survival, it's forgiveness. Support your local sheriff, 1969. You ever wonder what happens when you let a wisecracking drifter take over a town in total chaos? You get Support Your Local Sheriff, the Western that flips the genre on its head, then shoots holes in the ceiling for good measure. James Garner stars as Jason McCullough, a guy so chill he practically saunters his way into being sheriff of a gold rush town where the only law is duck and cover. The setup alone is gold. The town is crawling with outlaws. The mayor is more flustered than a gambler in church, and the local jail isn't even finished. It's literally missing bars. Garner plays it with that trademark sly grin, improvising his way through brawls, jailbreaks, and dumbfounded townsfolk. He's not a gunslinger with a tortured past. He's just smarter and funnier than everyone else in the room, and it's about time someone tried brains over bullets. The supporting cast is a rogues gallery of Western character actors, from Walter Brennan to Bruce Dern, all turning in performances that swing between slapstick and genuinely sharp. The script is loaded with zingers, but there's real affection for the genre underneath the goofiness. Support Your Local Sheriff isn't just a parody, it's a love letter written with a wink and a six-shooter. If you ever thought Westerns took themselves too seriously, this is the tonic you need. The Great Silence, 1968. Think all Westerns happen in the desert under a blazing sun? The Great Silence will freeze that idea solid. This Italian-American co-production cranks the temperature down to zero, literally, and rewrites the rules with a snowbound landscape, a silent hero, and an ending that'll knock the wind out of you. Jean-Louis Trintignant plays Silence, a mute gunslinger whose only language is revenge. The villain, Loco, is played by Klaus Kinski at his absolute creepiest. If you ever wanted a Western where the bad guy gives you chills just by looking at the camera, this is it. Director Sergio Corbucci loads every frame with bleak atmosphere and brutal irony. The story? Bounty hunters are picking off starving settlers, and the only one who'll stand up for them can't say a word. There's no Hollywood justice here. The Great Silence is ruthless, uncompromising, and so powerful that 20th Century Fox refused to release it in the United States because the ending was too dark. Over time, critics called it a masterpiece, a film that dared to break the genre wide open. If you're bored with happy endings and white hat heroes, this is the Western that reminds you just how dangerous the frontier really was. Beyond the Law, 1968. If you like your Westerns with a side of trickery and double crosses, Beyond the Law should be right up your alley. Lee Van Cleef, usually cast as the baddest of bad guys, plays Silvertip Cudlip, a silver-thieving drifter who would rather run a scam than a shootout. It's a bold move, flipping Van Cleef's usual villainy into something sly and strangely endearing. The plot is as twisty as a rattlesnake in a barrel. Cudlip and his sidekicks prefer brains over bullets, but when a cutthroat gang comes for the same haul, all bets are off. Gordon Mitchell delivers a performance that barely needs words. His presence alone screams trouble. The action bounces between cons, confrontations, and moments of real, gritty danger. What makes Beyond the Law shine is its willingness to bend the genre without breaking it. You still get showdowns and desert chases, but there's a streak of humor running through every betrayal. The ending lands with a punch, making you rethink everything you thought about who deserves to ride off into the sunset. In a world of cookie-cutter cowboys, Beyond the Law proves that the smartest outlaw sometimes wins. 40 Guns, 1957. Step aside cattle barons and town sheriffs, Barbara Stanwyck is in charge now. 40 Guns takes every expectation you have about westerns and sets them on fire. Stanwyck plays Jessica Drummond, a landowner with enough power to command 40 hired guns and enough nerve to put any man in his place. She's not waiting around for rescue, she's the one causing trouble. Director Samuel Fuller brings out all the visual swagger, packing the screen with sweeping wide shots, daring close-ups, and camera moves that still feel wild decades later. The movie is relentless. Every scene is loaded with tension, gunfire, and enough attitude to make John Wayne look shy. Barry Sullivan plays the lawman sent to arrest one of her thugs, but he ends up in Stanwyck's orbit, where rules get rewritten fast. The US thought the film was too intense, but Europe ate it up. 40 Guns was years ahead of its time, tackling power, gender, and control with a fearlessness that feels modern even now. If you think you've seen every kind of Western, this one's here to shake up your playbook and leave you breathless. The Mercenary, 1968. Ready for a Western that's equal parts chaos and brilliance? The Mercenary is a Zapata Western gone off the rails in the best way possible. Franco Nero stars as Sergei Kowalski, a Polish gunslinger who gets roped into the Mexican Revolution alongside Tony Musanti's fiery Paco and Jack Palance, who steals every scene as the vengeful Curly. From the first shot, you know you're not in Kansas anymore. There's lizard eating, dice rolling, and a string of double crosses that make the usual gold rush scams look tame. Originally, James Coburn was set to star, but after a last-minute billing dispute, the role got a rewrite and somehow became even better. Director Sergio Corbucci, also responsible for The Great Silence, crams in gunfights, betrayals, and wild humor without ever losing his grip on the story. The Mercenary doesn't just give you good guys and bad guys. It throws in revolutionaries, mercenaries, and everyone in between, all scrambling for survival and the upper hand. The result is a film that's as unpredictable as the frontier itself, full of strange alliances and wild energy. If you want a Western that keeps you guessing until the last bullet falls, this is the one to watch. The Gunfighter, 1950. Some Westerns are about the chase. The Gunfighter is about what happens when the chase finally catches up. Gregory Peck plays Jimmy Ringo, the fastest draw in the West, and he hates every second of it. He's not looking for a new fight or a saloon showdown. He's desperate to leave his legend behind and reconnect with his wife and son, who have moved on without him. But you can't outrun your own shadow. The second Ringo steps into a small-town bar. The vultures start circling. Young men itching to make a name, old enemies craving revenge, and townsfolk who want nothing but trouble. The whole movie takes place over a single slow-boiling day, building a sense of tension so thick you could slice it with a spur. Peck's performance is all quiet regret and simmering frustration. Even the mustache he wears, famously despised by the Fox studio boss, became the stuff of legend. Critics at the time thought it was too dark, too downbeat. But decades later, The Gunfighter stands as one of the most mature and honest Westerns ever made. The message hits hard. Legends don't get to write their own endings, no matter how fast they are. Man of the West, 1958. There are Westerns that ride the line between good and bad. Man of the West erases that line completely. Gary Cooper plays Link Jones, a man trying to bury his outlaw past and live straight. Fate, naturally, has other plans. He's dragged back into the orbit of his deranged uncle, played with a twisted charm by Lee J. Cobb, and forced to face the ugly truths he thought he'd left behind. Director Anthony Mann paints the West, not as a land of freedom, but as a wilderness teeming with cruelty and violence. The story is bleak, raw, and shockingly modern. Kidnapping, betrayal, and brutal family politics simmer under every scene. Cooper, already in his 50s, does his own horseback stunts, giving the action a weary authenticity you can't fake. Ignored at release and only later hailed as a masterpiece. Man of the West is a Western for people who like their stories with a double shot of reality. No cowboy hats can hide the moral rot at the core. Critics from Europe to America eventually recognized it for what it was, a film way ahead of its time and still hauntingly relevant. Ride the High Country 1962. The West is dying, and so are its heroes. Ride the High Country captures that final bittersweet moment when the old codes clash with a world that doesn't care anymore. Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea are two aging lawmen hired for one last job: to escort a shipment of gold through bandit country. It's supposed to be simple, but the frontier has a way of turning every plan to dust. Sam Peckinpah, before his blood-soaked classics, directs with a tenderness that sneaks up on you. The friendship between the two leads is complicated, honest, and deeply moving. Both men are relics in a world moving too fast, and the movie treats their decline with real affection and zero sentimentality. Betrayals, gunfights, and harsh truths pile up as the journey goes wrong. The final shootout isn't just about gold, it's about dignity and the kind of honor you can't put a price on. Ride the High Country is more than a Western. It's an elegy for every hero who ever thought the world would remember them. Watch it and you'll understand why some stories deserve a second ride. The Naked Spur, 1953. James Stewart is best known for his everyman roles, but in The Naked Spur, he's a man with nothing left to lose and nothing left to hide. Stewart plays Howard Kemp, a bounty hunter on the edge, chasing a killer through the Colorado Rockies. This isn't a story of white hats and black hats. It's a ruthless game of trust, greed, and survival. Kemp isn't alone. He's saddled with two accidental partners, each with their own hidden agenda, and a fugitive who knows exactly how to twist the knife. The landscape is breathtaking, but every mile forward is a psychological minefield. Stewart strips away his usual charm to reveal a character consumed by bitterness and obsession. Director Anthony Mann keeps the tension at a boil, never letting anyone or anything off the hook. Every character is desperate, every motive questionable. By the end, you realize that the greatest threat isn't the outlaw or the wilderness, it's the darkness we carry inside. The Naked Spur is a survival story where the stakes aren't just life and death, they're redemption and ruin. Day of the Outlaw, 1959. You know you're in for something different when the West is frozen solid and the bad guys are just as desperate as everyone else. Day of the Outlaw begins like a classic cattleman versus farmer tale, but then turns into a chilling siege story you won't forget. Robert Ryan plays Blaze Sterrett, a hardened rancher with an axe to grind, but his grudge gets sidelined fast when a gang of outlaws storms into the snowbound town. Led by Burl Ives, the outlaws are on the run and itching for trouble. What follows isn't a traditional shootout. It's a psychological standoff where every glance and every word could be deadly. The townspeople are trapped, supplies run low, and the tension piles up like snowdrifts against a door. Director Andre de Toth turns the frozen landscape into a character all its own. The isolation, the cold, and the slow burn dread seep into every frame. As the lines between hero and villain blur, you realize the West was never about black and white. It was about who could survive another day. Day of the Outlaw will leave you breathless, and maybe even grateful for a warm fire. There you have it, 15 westerns that Hollywood left gathering dust while everyone else argued about the same 5 classics. Each one proves there's a wild, unpredictable frontier still waiting beyond the usual gunfights and legends. Which forgotten gem just jumped to the top of your must-watch list? Did we miss a favorite you think deserves a comeback? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep-cut cinema, and share this with someone who thinks they've seen it all. The West isn't done surprising you yet. Are you ready for the next ride?